It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerantz in Sacramento. We are joined by Chris McKenzie. He is the executive director of the League of California Cities. No doubt, sir, that the nearly 500 cities in our state facing tremendous challenges with regard to the drought. We know that the governor is ordering that cities and towns reduce water use by 25%, and that's based off 2013. How are your members handling this?
Well, a lot depends on where they start out at.
Right.
For a number of the cities that have already taken very significant strides to conserve water, whether it's to take out vegetation or to put in conservation rate structures, it's not as big a reach. For those that hadn't started the process, they're going to have to reach further.
And let's talk about the disparate nature of various cities, various governments. Because when you think about it, it's often the more affluent cities that are using the most water. They have more land, they have more grass, they have more showers and toilets. And so you could compare, for example, a water district in North San Diego County is using over 300 per gallon, as an example, whereas in Southeast LA, using 45 gallons per day.
Sure, yeah, there's no doubt those differences exist. We have probably for too long acted like we don't live in a Mediterranean climate
Right.
or a desert climate, and we've overplanted, and we're going to have to come to grips with that. But in those areas that have the more expansive grass lawns, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure to convert those over to drought-tolerant plantings. They can be just as beautiful in many ways, but it is a dramatic shift.
So how does this happen? 25%, sir, is a lot. And you did say it. Some cities are already on their way, others are not.
Right.
But this, look, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but this seems to be a crisis.
Well, I think the data would suggest it is a crisis. We're in the fourth year of our drought. Our storage facilities, our reservoirs, are at about 50% of their average levels statewide. We're seeing our groundwater supplies depleted. I think the public, all the information I've seen would indicate the public really gets it.
Right.
And they, in fact, are probably ahead of the politicians in making these decisions. So you've got people who've made a lot of individual choices already to trim back on their water consumption. I know we have in our household, and I talked to plenty of people who have. So I think there's a lot of public support for doing this, but it's going to take, in some cases, enforcement regimes by cities.
And let me ask you about enforcement, because last year when the governor sought a 20% voluntary reduction, there was no teeth. Now we have this 25% mandatory reduction, and allegedly, there is the ability to fine $10,000 a day, but like you said, who's enforcing that regime?
Well, I think one of the greatest ways to enforce water conservation measures is through pricing, and we need to make sure we have the ability. There's a court case that's being decided next week down in Orange County, dealing with conservation, San Juan Capistrano, dealing with water pricing, which is going to be very important. We're all watching to see the outcome of that. But generally, when we can send consumers market signals, rate signals, it gets their attention. If somebody's so affluent that they don't care what they pay for water rates, you may have to use some other devices, whether it's civil penalties or something else. But then there's good old community, neighborhood pressure. And the reality is that this is something we all have in common. And I think Californians, as we saw during the energy crisis now many years ago, can come together to solve problems like this.
The one gripe I have heard, just kind of at the water cooler, metaphorically speaking, has been the notion that the governor is focused exclusively on residential use and non-ag commercial use. And while we don't want to pit Californians against Californians, it is undeniable that ag uses 75 to 80% of our water. It's also undeniable that while they contribute, let's say, $45 billion a year to our economy, that's only about 2% of our economy. And so when you have the governor seeking a 25% reduction, covering only 20% of the use, the non-ag use, that's a 5% reduction, which is wonderful, but that doesn't seem like it's going to cut it. So where do we go with this ag, non-ag dichotomy?
Sure. during times of crisis, we all start cannibalizing
Right.
each other, and I think it's really important that we be very careful about doing that. I just had lunch. I don't know about you, and I appreciate
Right.
the,
Yes,
the
we
source
do.
of that food. But that being said, we have to remember that you really can't regulate what you can't measure. And in the whole area of agricultural water consumption, there has been a long history of allowing water users who are using it for agricultural purposes to withdraw water, whether it's from surface water or from groundwater, without regulation. Now, just last year,
Right.
The legislature put in place the first set of regulations of groundwater. We are, admittedly, probably decades late in doing that, but they've done it. They've started it.
The other challenge, though, is those regulations require action within 25 years,
Yes.
not 25 days or
Yes.
25 months. We're in a crisis right now. And so, like you said, we don't want to start cannibalizing each other. But at the same time, do we need to start looking at ag's use of water? What they're planting, for example.
We need to look at everything. It's got to be an all of the above strategy. But I know from personal experience, seeing the areas of our state that have been fallowed because of cutbacks in federal and state water supplies, that we have farming communities in our state that are in a boatload of hurt. Because that's why the governor and the legislature in part passed the drought relief package a few weeks ago, is to get money to farm workers so they can buy groceries, so they can get water, because they don't have jobs because of the water cutbacks.
What's interesting about the drought relief packages from a few weeks ago, from last year, as a general proposition, those packages merely sped up the expenditure of money that was already appropriated. There wasn't a lot of new money in either of the packages this year or last year.
Sure.
Does the league believe we need to start really looking at dedicating more financial resources to this crisis?
Well, we have a package, a multi-billion-dollar package the voters approved last year that the legislature and the administration is just starting to spend. Just as much as we need to get that money out the door, we need to make sure it's done in an accountable way so the taxpayers don't in a few years find out that it was misused.
And let's
So
talk-
yeah, it can be done quickly, but it has to be done responsibly.
And let's talk about the bond, because obviously I think it is an example of Californians coming together. Democrats and
Absolutely.
Republicans, north, south, east, west, the bond passed with close to 2/3 of the vote. Californians spoke very loudly.
Yes.
$7.545 billion in spending. But like the groundwater legislation, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It takes a while to float the bonds. It takes a while to start construction.
Right, which underscores exactly why conservation is important right now. It's the thing we can do today and tomorrow. We can't speed up in a responsible way the expenditure of funds that might take years. For example, if we're going to construct a new reservoir, the engineering has to be done, and a lot of other environmental analysis has to be done. Years of work has to be done to expand our supply. Now, other parts of the bond, whether it's groundwater recharge or it's cleanup of pollution, some of that can be done quicker, and we should be doing that quicker.
What is the league doing to help its cities? I understand you have a new, is it called a listserv?
Right. What we've done is connect our members statewide through the internet so they can share strategies
Which I
that
think
they're
is
employing.
inspired. It may seem simple,
It's
but it is remarkable how people
Right.
can get ideas from their colleagues
Right.
up and down the state.
And having them be able to get it from their colleagues in California, and there's tremendous information that we can share from around the world, by the way. Remember, Israel and Australia and places like that are leaders in the area of water conservation and desalinization, which we're beginning to experiment with in our
And
state.
you'll come back next time and talk about desal, because that is an area where many of your members are looking at Santa Barbara, Cambria, Huntington Beach.
Right.
His name is Chris McKenzie. He is the executive director of the League of California Cities. I'm Brad Pomerantz. It's California Edition from Sacramento.